worth it to come into the city today, friends, not only because today is David's birthday, happy birthday, David, and not only because we got to see all of you, friends, connecting, but because I got to reunite with a dear friend and teacher of mine who's going to roll onto the screen as if it is Weekend Update on SNL. This is my dear friend,
Colin Toast, and here I am.
Rachel Brodie, who is, among other things, a phenomenal scholar and teacher. It is because of a beautiful meeting that we had many years ago that I explored my own rabbinate by asking a question that only she showed up to answer. The question for this conversation that I asked was, what are rabbis supposed to do today? And for those who might know Rachel Brodie,
I said nothing.
she had a lot of answers. And so I thought, last minute, I asked her just a second ago if she would do this with me.
Totally unprepared.
If she would teach some Torah with me. So I want to make sure that we dedicate our Torah in a grounded way. So Faye, we're dedicating this to your healing. And I see that someone else, Fabrice, you're in Paris, you're stuck at home with COVID. So we're sending you healing and strength. So to everybody who has something significant happening in their lives, we are very proud to share this moment of Torah with you. So let me line it up and ask you to have a thought with me. Friends, this is Parshat Metzora, which is really one of those parshiot that either you really look forward to or you really don't. Metzora is both a skin ailment, but it's not, as it's translated, leprosy or really anything that we could point to, even though in the ancient world it felt very real. The Torah describes it as something that can happen on your skin, something that can happen on your clothing, something that can happen on the walls of your home. And it's contagious in a way that feels like germs in our language, but pointed more to something happening within that manifested without. So one of the things that happens is instead of going to a medical practitioner, because there was no such thing then, the integrated way of seeing spiritual health and physical health is not something that the ancients would have had any trouble translating. But for us, we have to remember this isn't something that you get medication for. You go to the priest because that's the kind of thing that's happening. It's a spiritual truth, and the priest, the Kohen, had access to the divine. So if I wasn't sure, maybe there's something that is happening in me and therefore through me and on me, and I need to protect the community from it, and the community needs to be protected from it, I would go to the priest. This parsha says that when I go to the priest, I would say, is this Metzora? Is this Tzara? Am I Metzora? Is this Tzarat? And the role of the priest, which I've always found to be fascinating, is yes, it is, no, it isn't. And they have enormous power as a gatekeeper. So given the work that you do, not only as teacher, but as a thinker of what community means, is there something that approximates that today? Is there such a thing as a gatekeeper when it comes to, do I belong? Is there something in me that should separate me? And from the communal standpoint, should we ever say no to someone who's saying, let me in? So I'm wondering what your initial thought of, like, what does a gate look like today? And should there be anyone staffing it?
I guess first I'm struck by the idea of let me in. When, in fact, when the Metzora, somebody who's already in, should they be pushed out? I mean, in many ways, it feels like just the opposite, which is, can I stay, or do I have something within me, or something is going on with me that actually requires me not to be permanently excluded, but to step out for a little bit? So I guess I'm wondering more about that, and maybe less as a gatekeeper than sort of, I don't know. I don't know what the role is of somebody who would be, maybe a parent who's like, it's time for a timeout, like for your own good and for our, it's always like for your own sake, you should calm down. I'm like, no, as a parent, I could say, actually, it's for my sake, because this won't be good for you. So I guess I'm thinking of it more in that way. But I don't know what the equivalent is when you might say, you know what, you might want to take some time for sabbatical. I don't know what it would be.
Right. I mean, that's it's funny. I totally get it. I think when we're being honest with ourselves as parents, we understand that the disequilibrium is too much for me.
Totally.
So you go over there for a little bit.
Exactly.
And then the question is, right, I'm not judging myself, obviously not you either. The disequilibrium is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But so what, right? Is that my responsibility as the one with the power in that dynamic, theoretically? Right?
I know your kids. It's not theoretical.
Is that a responsibility that I bear to endure the discomfort? Or is that actually something important to model or teach or even require
Mhm.
for the homeostasis or the calm
Mhm.
of the camp, of the community, of the family?
Mhm.
So I'm wondering, is that a correct practice
Mhm.
to send someone else away because it's uncomfortable to be near? Because ultimately, that's sort of what Metzora was. It was both contagious,
Mhm.
but what was contagious about it was an indication that something was not in equilibrium, not connectable with God at the moment.
Mhm.
Because Tzarad wasn't a forever thing.
Right.
So I'm just wondering, I mean, the priest had to do it, I guess.
Mhm.
Is there any reason that we need to do it? Should we do it now? Because I think you've described accurately that we do it.
Right. But maybe it's more like a therapist who's, actually you go to them saying something doesn't feel right. Do you think I need this kind of intervention or do I not? Right. It's
Mm.
more just like it's a question. I think the question's the most interesting part, right? It's not an assumption that I should be in it or I shouldn't be in it, but that actually like you tell me, like you're the expert, you have the direct or the closer line to God, and I'm
Mm.
feeling off, and you tell me, is it should I stay here or should I not? Am I a threat to other people? I don't mean physical. Well, I guess in that case it depends how much we want to play with this as a metaphor,
Right.
but something internally feels off, and then a therapist could say, you know what, I think it actually just requires that you take a bath or do something else, and or it might be, you know what, you actually do need to be outside for a while. i,
Mm.
I don't know. I can't quite figure out how to play with the metaphor.
No, yeah, I'm not sure what to do with it either, but it introduces a really powerful dynamic, at least in my experience of therapy,
Mhm.
when I would come with those kinds of questions
Yeah.
to the person that I turned to for my own care.
Right.
At least the practitioner that I worked with, who is a blessing in the world, said back to me, "You tell me."
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Ah!
And now you know why both
Oh
why
my
Rachel Brodie is
goodness.
both the gifted scholar she is and the human being
Oh
that
my
she
goodness.
that she is.
But what's interesting? The priest did not say, "You tell me."
Right. That's
Right?
actually that's part of I hadn't thought about it in this way. I'm really intrigued by the concept because if I worry
Hmm.
that something is manifesting biblical language from within me,
Right.
right? And not in the rabbinic way of understanding, right? I spoke ill of someone, I was motzi shemra, therefore this is happening to me.
Hmm.
That's a layer of interpretation that I don't think is manifest in the text
Hmm.
itself. In the text, something's happening and I don't understand. I see it on my walls, I see it in my world, I see it in and on my body.
Hmm.
So I need you to tell me what you see. In modern, I think, healthy relationships, self affirmation is the place to understand how I am right with the world, right with God, right with others.
Hmm.
There are moments where I need to say, did I hurt you?
Hmm.
And that might be different, but maybe the only approximate, I don't know, but maybe the only approximate for Metzora in a spiritual sense
Hmm.
today is, can you tell me if there's a way that I can repair our relationship?
Hmm.
Is there a part of how I have been that has affected you in a way that I can't see? But then ultimately, I'm playing with this for a second. If that's the framework, then modern Metzora is not something I would see manifesting on me. I would see it manifesting in my world. Something has changed in my world.
Why not in you?
I don't know.
I mean, if it is really more a question of like a spiritual, something feels spiritually off, if it really is about my relationship, I think most people I know don't have the breadth of knowledge or experience to understand what else is possible. And so if I think something's off, I might go to someone, right, who might help me think about it in a way that's like, actually, what you're describing is this kind of a thing. And, and you actually can stay, let's say, within,
Mm.
Jewish tradition by thinking X, Y, and Z, even though in your more limited world and experience, it might only be this. And it's a more expansive way of saying, you know what, you're really outside the fold on this one. And I think, I mean, I wonder if it's the equivalent of saying, you know what, go find a different spiritual path, like go outside the encampment and see, as many people do, seeking things outside of their own encampment, so to speak.
Mm.
And some people stay out for longer, and some people always do. But I think, what's exciting is the idea that, when I think about sort of the source of our values, when we have a real quandary, let's say in this case a spiritual quandary, who do we go to, right? And do we turn to a book? Do we turn to a therapist? Do we turn to a rabbi? Do we turn to a friend who's more knowledgeable? Like, who is the priest in that situation,
Right.
especially about spiritual things?
You know what I love that you just did?
Aside from make fun of rabbis,
No, we could do that all day. Is you translated the person who we describe as Metzora as a seeker.
Yeah.
I've never thought about it in
Me
that way.
either.
It's actually very beautiful to think about it in that
Mhm.
way. And the seeker actually initiates the question.
Mhm. It feels very Pesach to me, right?
How so?
Asking a question
Ah,
and sort of initiating
huh,
the ritual with questions, right? What is this,
right.
right? I mean, in some ways, it's that simple, right? Hold out your arm and say, "What is this?"
Right, maza.
Raza, right? Exactly.
Huh.
It's an interesting.
I love that. It's also what it does, and I'm not surprised that this came from our conversation, is it also levels the playing field,
Mhm.
right? Because the Metzora, in this way of speaking, has the right and obligation and agency
Mhm.
to say who they want to turn to. Um, in that world, it's the Kohen. In this world,
A lot of
right,
options.
it has to start from within. It might
Mhm.
end up a question that is asked within, but a healthy other with which to have the conversation, whose eyes are the way to see.
I gotta say, I think the difference is it's not just internal, right? There is a physical manifestation of this with tzara'at. So even if I'm feeling it inside, I could hide it, right? I could actually, I could code switch, I could change
Mhm,
things, but Metzora, like I actually have something visibly wrong with me.
mhm.
And my guess is other people would be asking me, like, hey, you seem a little scaly today, have you tried some lotion? Like, and maybe you
But
should
the but the text
right.
could have the text could have that's the thing that actually I know I'm a little bit focused on the from within the self.
Yeah,
But the text doesn't begin with if someone sees
right.
something on you
You're right.
and says it to you, and then you notice it on you. This is something that really does begin with the individual, whether
Hmm.
it's invisible
Hmm.
or manifest. But it's an interesting tension there
Hmm.
because the Metzora
Hmm.
could hide for some time. Maybe eventually it would be, it would show in the exposed parts of skin.
Hmm.
But I I find it liberating so
Really?
you said
Really?
Pesach.
Yeah.
No, I find it liberating to see the Metzora as initiating the conversation. I think that's
Yeah,
really
I think that
beautiful.
is lovely.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking about it as a metaphor about COVID. When you think about what can be hidden and what can't be, about feeling like you might be posing a risk, right? It's a similar kind of assessment, right? Which is,
Yeah.
I might think I don't have COVID, but who am I to actually know that without some kind of external testing, right? And I might be
Huh.
exposing other people because I think I don't, right? Or I'm not going to ask. Don't ask, don't tell. Like I don't really know, what. But at the same time, we might actually be exposing people to, in this case of Tzara'at and
Mm.
potentially of COVID, right? So like, is the doctor the gatekeeper? Is the test the gatekeeper?
Is the
You know,
task force, right, doing any work for any specific community?
is Anthony Fauci the Kohen Gadol?
Yes. Yes.
I love that.
Friends, I want to say one last thing before before we sign off. When I began my pulpit in Berkeley, California, it was because of that conversation that Rachel and I shared, where she told me about this very interesting community in Berkeley, and I would never have thought about it except that I was blown away by her Torah the very first time that we spoke. So I want to share not only my gratitude to Rachel for that big life moment that she opened up for me, but also my first Shabbat that I officiated. Um, she had learned this melody that we've now been sharing every morning, written by Rabbi David Paskin, that I had sung a lot. And just before I started teaching, she led the community in singing the song.
Which is amazing because I'm completely tone deaf.
Well, not completely.
Well, pretty much.
Okay. Anyway, so we're going to end with it as an igun, and there's poetry here. There's poetry here. So thank you, friends, for being present. Thank you for saying yes
A
last second.
pleasure. It was a total pleasure.
Oh, I'd love to do this again with you. This is so much fun. All right, friends. So in honor of my dear teacher and friend Rachel, we'll sing our way into a good day. Here we go. Ya la 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 la. Ya la la la. La 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 la. Ay, ay, la, la, la. Ya, la, 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 la. Diddy, ay, la, la, la. Diddy, ay, la, 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 la. Ay, ay, la, la, la. Bless you, friends. Have a really good day.
Yay.
We'll see you tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye.
That's so